Sean Parker. I am a student at Liberty University and working on my degree in traumatology, my PhD. What I want to do first is just kind of give you a little bit of information on myself, who I am. I'm a licensed clinical therapist as well as a substance abuse therapist. The topic that we chose for today is risk factors and early interventions for adolescents. I do want to real quick get an introduction of everybody that's here. So if y'all could please give me first a letter of your first name that describes you. For example, mine would be Silly Sean. So in this way, we can all just say, it helps me remember everybody's names and who you are, and as well as helping you guys remember each other's name by giving a little verb to who you are. So we'll start here. We'll start with the first letter of your name, some verb to describe you, adjective to describe you, and what your name is.
Bo. Crazy.
So I didn't describe it well. So it's supposed to be a B. It's supposed to be a B. So
your name starts with a B. Actually, it starts with an A.
Okay, so it has to be. Is it A? Let's see here. I am. Yeah, there you go. Bodacious Bo.
Bodacious Bo. All right, we'll go with that. All right.
Enthusiastic Erica.
Enthusiastic Erica, thank you.
Cool Charles.
Cool Charles. Yes, ma'am.
Lady Lakeisha. Yeah.
Nice, Lady Lakeisha.
And Jovial JJ.
Jovial J. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. Real fast, I want to just kind of give you a brief kind of understanding of why I chose this topic. I have worked kind of in the mental health field for the last 15 years now. Been working as a substance abuse therapist as well as a mental health therapist for the last 5 years. I actually was over an adolescent substance abuse program for a couple of years. This was, I think, from around 2014 to 2016. And I was over this program and had a lot of young people in there that I did substance abuse counseling with. This one young lady, her name was Madison, we called her Maddie. She was there for quite a few drugs that she was using, but one of the biggest ones was meth. So we really made a lot of progress, did a lot of family work. She was from the mountain area and their family would come, we would do family work. She was there for about 6 months. She was released, did really well for a few months, but there were some factors, some risk factors from her home that kind of put her back in the same places, put her in a kind of uncomfortable mental health space, and she began using again. Well, one day I actually was in a conference in Texas and I got a call from her mom and she said, "Sean, she's gone." And my first thought was, oh gosh, she stole a car, because she had stolen a car before. So I was thinking, oh, she stole a car and left, where did she go? But then I realized the way she was crying, I was like, no, what happened? Well, someone had laced her drugs with something and purposely, and actually she died. So they actually tried to revive her, whatever drug house she was at, tried to revive her, put her in the tub, ran water, wouldn't wake up. So they literally took her and dropped her off on the neighbor's porch and left. So that was a really, really kind of rough time for me and dealing with this. Not only was it somebody I was working with, but I had gotten close to the family and things like that. And it made me start thinking, okay, how can we prevent substance abuse in adolescents as much as possible? How can we see signs? What are some of the risk factors that go into it? So that's why we chose the topic that we're going to choose today. So we're going to go through and discuss kind of some of our learning objectives or learning outcomes. So basically the gist of learning outcomes is to have a blueprint of what we want to learn for the day. The first is, by the time we finish this course, everyone in here will be able to identify 4 risk factors that may lead to substance use or abuse by adolescents. The second learning objective would be able to critique those precursors or risk factors. Being able to determine, okay, what is leading to it? What needs are being met in the individuals with the kids? Because we're going to spend some time focusing on what the needs are being met or what's being masked. And I'll explain later on what that means. And the third objective is being able to list potential treatment approaches either before they get started or after. Yes, ma'am.
So just for the purpose of the discussion, how do you define adolescence?
So adolescence is age 12 to 20 technically.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we will watch a brief video. Hopefully it plays well.
Well, as our children head back to school this month, it's natural to want to focus on making sure they have the supplies, the notebooks, pencils, and the school supplies. But parents also need to be sure that their students are armed with information to help keep them safe and healthy. And today, when we're talking about the dangers of teen substance abuse, a very important topic, joining us today is Megan Rose, chemical dependency counselor with Mercy's Sedlicek Treatment Centers. Thanks for joining us today, Megan.
Thanks.
A very important topic that probably doesn't get talked about enough. How big of a problem do you think teen substance abuse really is?
I think that teen substance abuse has been an issue, and I think it continues to be a big issue.
Okay, so how important is it to have those conversations? If you're the parent of a teenager here in Eastern Iowa, how do you do that?
Well, I think there's
It's a big question. Sorry, loaded question.
I think that you do need to spend a lot of time with your children and really get to know them. And if you see any warning signs, don't be afraid to talk with them about that. Give them the information that they need.
Okay, how prevalent of a problem would you say it is?
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said that adolescents between the age of 12 and 17 have been abusing illicit substances within the past 30 days. They gave the statistic of about 10%.
Okay.
And illicit substances does not include prescription pills, synthetics, over-the-counter drugs, or alcohol. We know
So there are a lot of things that are not included that are being abused on a daily basis.
correct. And they know that the statistic for alcohol is about 18 to 19% of adolescents have abused alcohol within the last 30 days.
Oh, 12 to 17-year-olds. That's a young, it seems young to
It is
be
young.
abusing those kinds of drugs. What are the risk factors for those?
Some of the risk factors that we notice for adolescents who are abusing substances are if there is a family history, there's always a genetic component to substance abuse and chemical dependency, so that's a risk factor. Another huge risk factor is if the children are not doing well in school or they're associating with a lot of peers who are abusing substances. And one of the final risk factors is if they already have a history of mental illness. We know that substance abuse and mental illness occur at the same time, and it can be really challenging to try and get them the help that they need.
Okay, so let's say you're in this boat where you realize either your child has a problem, or maybe you're a teenager and you realize one of your friends has a problem. Where can you go for help?
There are a lot of different areas to get help. I would recommend starting out with a doctor or a counselor, whether it's a school counselor or a therapist that you're seeing regularly. You can talk to friends and neighbors. You can call Sedlicek. If parents have questions, we have a family program at Sedlicek that the parents can come to and they can ask the counselor and other parents questions. There are several different treatment centers in the Cedar Rapids area and across Iowa, and I think that getting them into a treatment center or at least having them assessed can be really helpful if you think that there is some problems.
Yeah, and real quick, we're almost out of time, but there's a webinar coming up next month to kind of tackle some of these issues.
Yeah, there's a webinar that Mercy's hosting on September 12th. It's a Thursday from noon to 1.
Okay.
And you can log on to www.mercycare.org/live, and I'll be facilitating.
So with that, you guys, a lot of that information is directed in particular to, of course, to Iowa. Not necessarily here, but at the same time, the same information kind of applies across the board as far as potential warning signs, risk factors, as well as treatment. Every city, every state has their own treatment facilities and hotline numbers that you can call for assistance. So these are additional risk factors that some were mentioned in the video, others were not. They talked about the affiliation with negative peers. They talked about the school engagement, poor grades, things like that. One thing they didn't mention is parental substance abuse as far as current in the home. They did talk about past history of mental health issues with the parents, but substance abuse among parents in the home. Chaotic home environment, I think that's one of the things that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people across the board. It could be arguing in the house, it could be abuse in the home, it could be just parents, to some kids, this parents not even getting along could be considered chaotic to them. So there's some protective factors as well. A lot of these, if you guys notice, are all centered around family structure. So much of it starts in the home as far as providing a good, nurturing, positive environment. Making sure you're aware of what's going on in your kid's life. So additional risk factors. These are ones that we don't talk about often. The sexual abuse as well as sexual identity. We will spend a little bit of more time on that later on, but kids feeling like they're not accepted, feeling like they can't reach out to their parents, feeling like they can't reach out to friends, feeling ostracized by others because of their sexual preferences or sexual identity, as well as sexual abuse. So earlier I talked about what things are being met, what needs are being met, and what needs are being masked. So many times we use substances or we use other addictions to either meet a need or to mask a need or to mask something that's going on. For example, if I'm depressed, I may be masking that by using drugs. But if I am lonely, I may be meeting a need of substance abuse because of peer interactions, being around a certain group of people, joining gangs, using it with gang members because it's like, okay, these are my family members, these are friends, so I'm going to use drugs to fit in. So that's getting a need met. Of course, we talked about the friends and stuff, but also low self-esteem. That is also getting masked. Kids who have low self-esteem, a lot of times they may use certain drugs to kind of boost their self-esteem, to boost their mood. A lot of people say, hey, when I get drunk, that's when I turn up. Well, guess what? When they're not drunk, they have a hard time relating to others. So they're doing that to meet a need. Pain, abuse, anger. Those are all things that are either met or masked. So we're looking at dual diagnosis now. So before we kind of wanted to look at, so what are some things that may lead to substance abuse? And we talked about mental health disorders. These are mental health disorders and what drug they're linked to. Depression is highly linked to alcohol. Schizophrenia is linked to marijuana, which is very, very, very interesting. But what happens is, of course, with schizophrenia, that it causes a lot of disturbance in mood, hallucinations, things like that. Well, what calms you down? What settles you down? What kind of clears your mind a little bit? Marijuana. So that's why that's really linked to that, as well as nicotine. Heroin is also linked to depression. People still do heroin, surprisingly. Smoking, snorting, or inhaling, they find ways of getting heroin into their system. Opiates, of course, for PTSD. A lot of times what happens is with PTSD, it's linked to some type of physical trauma, some type of pain. You're prescribed prescription drugs, you get hooked on it. And that's a lot of times that PTSD, how that's linked. Because you may have been, say you were in the military and you were injured at war and you were prescribed drugs, or you had some car accident and you had back pains and you were prescribed something. Well, all of a sudden you get addicted to Oxy or something like that. And that's why that's linked so much to PTSD. And talking about interventions, parent and family engagement. We saw a little bit of that on a couple of slides back. Being active as parents, family support. These are all things that we had talked about before. Parental disapproval of substance use. What that means is parents who don't say, oh, that's okay. There are many parents who say, hey, if you're going to drink here with me. If you're going to smoke here with me. What happens is the child sees that as approval, saying, hey, this is okay. So it makes it, in their minds, a lot more simple to say, oh, okay, well, it's fine to use drugs because my parent says it's okay.
Now, are you considering substance abuse alcohol also?
Alcohol, marijuana, all that is tied into substance, yes. Mm-hmm. Parental monitoring, of course. School connectedness. We've all seen those kids who aren't interested in school, who don't want to attend school, could care less about school. Well, guess what happens if they're not at school in the middle of the day? They're finding something to get into. And typically they're running with other people who are not interested in school, who are usually into a whole bunch of other stuff that they may not need to be into. So just being connected in school, having something of interest in school, maybe it's sports, maybe it's clubs, things like that, making sure they're connected in school, that is a deterrent to using drugs. Of course, once you start seeing certain signs, family therapy, and that includes stuff like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, centered around how you think. Basically, your thoughts and actions are linked with your emotions. Contingency management. Basically what that is either a reward system or may call it some type of other deterrent system. We're not gonna call it punishment, but saying, hey, if you are doing well in school, you'll get this amount of money. Or if you don't do this, then you get that. Or if you do this, this gets removed. Basically, all that is making sure there's something set up to where there is either an adverse effect if they're doing something they're not supposed to, or a reward system. And recovery support is linked to support groups, okay? 12-step programs, things like that, peer groups. So what I have real fast is brief case study. What I want you to do with this, read the case, and then we'll also read it, put it up on screen, talk about it out loud. I want you to find 4, this goes back to our first learning objective and outcome. Find 4 risk factors within your case study. So I have 3 of them, so Jay, you got maybe by yourself. All right. Social distancing, yes. Since you're the only one with the mask, we'll let you go ahead and have your own.
I need a blast.
Okay.
I mean,
So we'll take about 3 or 4 minutes to read this.
Eric, can you look on there and see my
Yeah, I know
glasses?
they are.
Please. No, the ones by that one too.
You want these?
I want the broken. Right there to you, right where your hand's at. That's the broken?
Yeah,
That's the broken.
So those the broken ones is what work.
It is sad. It is so sad. Look, man, it is so sad. I only got one arm.
I had my 8th grade glass up till I was about 30. So I did. So to find 4 or as many, I'll say, as many risk factors as you can to potential substance use. Some may have 3, some may have 5. So case study 1, we'll go ahead and get started. So Jay, you had case study 1. We're not going to spend time reading it because we have it up on the screen, but what I do want you to do is point out what you have listed as your risk factors, and we'll see if there's any other ones that maybe we skipped over. So what are the risk factors you have on yours?
She had her parents had a divorce at a young age, typically an age where a child's getting to understand the significance of relationships, not just, dependency, but understanding relationships at 3 years old. She obviously had physical abuse from a stepfather, someone that she was supposed to trust, and he took advantage of the situation. I guess you can count this as a third thing as well. The mother knew about it and was negligent, never intervened. The fourth thing is the smell of alcohol. So there was an underlying factor for the stepfather beating her. So she would associate abuse with alcohol. And then she moved in with her father. So once again, she's uprooted from another place. And she didn't have really acceptance in the school because of her shyness. And she also didn't communicate with her father. So that kind of created extra distance between her father, and clearly with her mother and stepfather as well. But if you can count it a good thing, at least she understood that she still needed to be loved. Unfortunately, she was seeking love from places, and I'm assuming she was probably seeking love from places that weren't good for her, because it said that she was desperate for love and would do almost anything for attention. So that meant that she was, you probably infer that she was probably doing some things that she shouldn't have been just to seek attention and love.
So that's good. So in that was what, 7? About 7 risk factors in this short story. It really, and this is probably not even all of her life, but in this little bit of information, we saw about 7 risk factors there. So we are going to spend a little bit more time, giving a little bit more detail in this shortly, but so far we have about 7 identified.
You already know it's here for you.
So, case study number 2.
Okay.
Keisha.
So Jeremiah had ADHD
She's
and
coming down.
major depression disorder.
Okay, she's coming.
That's fine.
Here, I'll do it.
That's totally fine. This is part of class. Yes.
ADHD, major depression disorder. He struggled in school. The grandfather the grandmother suffered from PTSD.
Yep. Mental health.
And then the father used marijuana. And
He was always home by himself.
always home by, and then he wasn't invested in school.
Right. Absolutely. So those were Jeremiah's risk factors. And like I said, we're going to go into a little bit more details about some higher level thinking type things in a second. So we will move on now to case study number 3, Erica and Bo.
So Roberta was looking at her sexual identity. She was stressed about coming out to her parents.
Yep.
She suffered from acceptance of herself and acceptance of, she found acceptance in her friends, which is how she fell into the arms of whoever that was. And then the parental acceptance was the other one. They were with strict parents. She was concerned. She afraid of her strict parents. That's the ones that we found.
Okay. So, and of course, the last one, that last sentence is her being sent away. So, yeah. So we talked about kind of chaotic family environments. This is kind of causing that because, and it's not necessarily, some people may see it, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just the belief system. That belief system being different than hers caused that kind of chaotic family environment, and it led her to being involved in a whole bunch of things that she didn't need to just to feel accepted. Chuck, I saw your hand up a second. Okay. So, really quick, this is where we're going to. At first, we're just kind of gaining some knowledge. We want to get to the point where we are evaluating what's going on. Okay, this is just a higher level of thinking that we want to get to show exactly what you guys are taking from the class. So, with that being said, we are going to talk really quick about what needs you felt were being met and what needs you felt were being masked, as well as potential treatment options that you may have. So we'll start with, go back to Bo and Erica and Roberta. So what needs was she getting met? What needs do you think she's trying to get met by the things that she's starting to get into?
Her self-esteem.
Self-esteem.
Acceptance,
right? So I think she was probably trying to have both of those needs met. When we looked at potential interventions, what are some things, starting with the family, what are some things that the family could do to kind of help prevent those risk factors?
Be understanding.
Good. Be more understanding of her sexual identity and what's going on, right?
If I can remember, there was one with being knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable, yep. Yep.
This is a tough one.
It is. What do you think about potential therapy?
Well, nowadays, do you do that therapy for kids that are looking, because sexual identity is so high.
Right,
nowadays.
right.
So
what happens, right. So what happens usually with that is more family therapy to have the family work on how to connect, how to be closer, how to get understanding of things. So, but that's good. Thank you for that. Group 2, any potential interventions you see that could be used?
So one of the main ones I see, and this was a good case study for us because our son has ADHD.
Oh, okay.
He was very disruptive in the class.
Mm-hmm.
Two-parent home. One of the things that I saw, and not so much as from the family standpoint, but which was from a school standpoint when they seen he was being disruptive. From our standpoint, and I see that maybe the school could have stepped in because there was a teacher or counselor who recognized the disorder, the ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And so because he was being disruptive, his mind could not focus for long periods of time.
Gotcha.
So he couldn't sit down for a math test with 100 questions. You have to give him 10 because his attention span was not going to hold that long. So I see opportunities for maybe the school to tap into that and maybe tailor his study program to meet his disorder. So that's on the academic side.
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
And one thing also when here, the parents could spend more time with him.
Yes.
That's because that is the biggest depression that he has is when he comes home alone and he's alone by himself, and that's when he feels the worst with his depression. So his parents could make time to do something special with him on the weekends or weekdays.
Okay, that is awesome. Thank you. All right, lastly, Jay, anything with Miss Julie?
Julie was desperate to be loved and would also seek attention from others. So one of the first ways to address those issues is, for one, sitting down and talking with her mom and dad about the issues she had with her stepfather and talking to a therapist and possibly getting law enforcement involved, just because she needs that sense of feeling safe. The other thing was that they need to schedule some family time together, some good quality family time together, and not just talking to a counselor, but the family, the mom and the dad need to sit down with Julie, and just whether it's games, taking her to the park, because the first place that she'll be able to seek and find that love is within that family, because if she won't find it there, she'll go somewhere else to get it. And that will also provide that attention, maybe even bringing some friends over, letting them have a playtime. Clearly the issue about the physical abuse from the stepfather has to be addressed. They have to sit down and talk and address that. She's harboring some deep rooted issues there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, both.
All right, so Professor Silly Sean, one of the things as a therapist, let me ask you, as a therapist, what is the biggest complaint from the youth that you get as far as them being able to communicate with the parents? Because it seems nowadays, talking to the parents is almost the last thing that most kids want to do.
So the biggest thing I see is a lack of willingness to collaborate, because what happens is the kid is trying to get a need met, but the parent is trying to get a need met. And what happens is 9 times out of 10, that parent is like, my need trumps yours, so I'm not really listening to what you have to say. So basically it's an opportunity to say, okay, let's use curfew. The child may be saying, I want a 12 o'clock curfew, and the parent's like, I'm not going past 10. Guess what? Allow that child to write out a list. This is why I want the curfew. This is what's going on. I'm going to say, hey, this is the reason why I need you in by 10. These are the risk factors. These are the problems. Okay, let's sit down, discuss. Maybe it's not something that goes that child's way. Maybe it still stays at 10 o'clock, but at least that child feels like they were heard and that they sat down and had a conversation. Or it may be even saying, hey, 10:30 may be acceptable, because that child may feel like it's a win, but it just kind of all depends on more so the parent's ability to sit. The old school parenting, it doesn't say anything about collaborating. It's just like, do what I say and shut up, but nowadays I think kids are really looking to be heard. They're really trying to understand, because they're exposed to so much. Now, it's hard to say, do this because I said so, because now they have the internet, they have friends, they have everything just telling them something else. So we can't just get away with that anymore, because they have too much access to information.
Yeah, because you've seen how organized a million kids did to go up to Washington and march. And that's the type of, we as parents, that's the type of kids we're dealing with now.
Right.
That they really have a mind of their own, starting out probably
right. They're out there marching and stuff too. And we can't go out there and say, well, if you're out at 11 o'clock, you bound to something bad may happen. It was like, well, statistically, it says more kids get hurt from 5 to 8, So all of a sudden you're like, because they have access to so much information. So now it's time to, let's sit down, discuss why things are, why I feel the way I feel. Maybe we can come up with something mutually. Maybe we can't, but at least you're being heard. So thank you. I kind of put story time up just for a reason like that, to be able to ask questions, to be able to discuss additional things if we like. But I really do appreciate you guys, and you were very attentive. I felt like it was a successful class. Appreciate it, y'all. And we'll go on from there. Have a good one. Thank you.
I have more questions.
I know. After the camera's off. Oh, man, that works.